I sat there in the courtroom, the air thick with tension, my hands resting on the wooden table in front of me, feeling every scratch and groove under my fingertips. Across from me was Camilla, my soon-to-be ex-wife, her perfectly styled hair and sharp gray suit making her look like she'd already won. Next to her, Griffin Leary, her lawyer, leaned back in his chair with that smug grin plastered across his face, like he was enjoying every second of my downfall. The divorce hearing had dragged on for hours, and now we were at the end, the part where they divide up our lives like it was some garage sale. Griffin's voice cut through the room, sharp and mocking. "Enjoy your new life. You'll be leaving with nothing," he said, his eyes glinting with victory. Camilla didn't even look at me when she spoke, her words cold and quick. "You should have been a better husband." I felt my heart slam against my chest, a hot rush of anger mixing with something heavier. Regret. Maybe, or just plain hurt. But I didn't let it show. I kept my face steady, my jaw tight, my eyes locked on the judge's weathered hands as he shuffled papers in front of him. The judge, a tired-looking man with gray hair and a voice like gravel, turned to me. "Mr. Rhodes, do you have any final words before I make my ruling?" he asked, peering over his glasses. The room went quiet, and I could feel Camilla and Griffin watching me, waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to say something weak. But I didn't. Instead, I felt a small, strange calm settle over me, like the moment before a storm hits. I reached into my briefcase, my fingers brushing against the thick folder I'd spent months putting together. "Actually, yes," I said, my voice steady as I slid it across the table toward him. "I'd like to submit this as evidence." The judge raised an eyebrow, curious, and took it from me. Camilla's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing, but I didn't look at her. Not yet. I wanted to see your face when the truth hit. The judge opened the folder, his fingers flipping through the pages one by one. I knew what he was seeing. Every receipt, every email, every bank statement I dug up like buried treasure. My hands stayed clasped in front of me, but inside, my mind was racing. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. This was about everything she'd taken from me, everything she thought I'd let her get away with. The silence stretched on, and I risked a glance at Camilla. Her smirk was gone. Her face had gone pale, like the blood had drained right out of her. Griffin shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping nervously on the table, his confidence cracking. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The judge's eyes flicked up to me, then back to the papers, and I could tell he was starting to understand. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment sink in. For months, I'd been the quiet one, the guy who didn't fight back, the husband who let her walk all over him. But not today. Today, I was the one with the upper hand, and it felt good, better than I'd expected. Camilla's voice broke the silence, sharp and shaky. "What did you do?" she hissed, leaning toward me, her eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in her before, fear. I didn't answer right away. I just smiled, a small, tight smile, and turned my attention back to the judge. He cleared his throat, setting the folder down, and looked at Camilla's side of the room. "Counselor, Ms. Rhodes," he said, his tone heavy, "we're going to need to discuss this further." My heart was still pounding, but now it wasn't anger driving it. It was satisfaction. I'd played my card, and the game was about to change. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the judge called for a recess, and I watched Camilla and Griffin huddle together, their heads bent low, their voices sharp and fast. She shot me a look, half rage, half panic, and I met her gaze without flinching. 12 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Me with a folder full of her secrets, her with nothing but a lawyer who was starting to sweat. I didn't know what the judge would decide, not yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Camilla wasn't laughing anymore. And that was enough for now. I stood up as the bailiff motioned for us to leave the room, my folder still sitting on the judge's bench like a ticking bomb. This wasn't the end, not even close, but it was a start. A damn good one. I walked out of the courtroom, my steps steady, my head high, feeling lighter than I had in years. Whatever came next, I was ready. I woke up that morning expecting the usual, coffee brewing in the kitchen, the soft hum of the house waking up, maybe a quiet hour to myself before the day started. The bedroom was still dark, the curtains drawn tight, and the clock on my nightstand blinked 6:45 in red digits. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of another restless night, and swung my legs out of bed. Camilla was already up, which wasn't unusual. She'd always been the early riser, the one with energy I could never match. I shuffled into the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the tile, and saw her standing by the counter. She wasn't making coffee, though. She was holding a manila envelope, her fingers tapping against it absently, her eyes glued to her phone. "Morning," I mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot, but she didn't look up. Instead, she slid the envelope across the counter toward me, her voice casual, like she was telling me about the weather. "I've spoken to my lawyer," she said. "This should be simple." I froze, my hand hovering over the pot, the words sinking in slow and heavy. 12 years we'd been married, 12 years of me standing by her, building a life together, and this was how it ended? I picked up the envelope, my fingers fumbling with the clasp, and pulled out the papers inside. Divorce papers. Her signature was already there, neat and sharp, like she'd signed a business contract. My eyes scanned the pages, the legal words blurring together, but one thing stood out clear as day. I was getting nothing. No house, no money, no piece of the business I'd helped her build. Zero. I looked up at her, waiting for something, an explanation, an apology, anything. But she just kept scrolling on her phone, her face blank. "Camilla," I said, my voice rough, "what is this?" She finally glanced at me, her eyes cool and distant. "It's over," she said. "You knew this was coming." Did I? I stood there, the papers shaking in my hands, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of it. She didn't even flinch, just went back to her phone like I wasn't there. I'd spent years supporting her, pouring myself into Rhodes Interiors, her design company. I wasn't the flashy one, sure. I didn't stand in front of clients or schmooze at parties, but I was the backbone. I'd handled the boring stuff, the admin work, the accounting, the endless emails and schedules. I'd stayed up late balancing her books when she was too tired, planned her events when she was too busy, all without a paycheck or a thank you. And now? Now she was tossing me out like I'd been some hired help she didn't need anymore. "After everything," I said, my voice low, "this is what I get." She sighed, setting her phone down, and looked at me like I was a kid who didn't get it. "You didn't keep up," she said. "I grew. You didn't." The words hit me like a punch, and I felt something inside me snap. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet break, like a string pulled too tight. I walked out of the kitchen, the papers still in my hand, and sat on the couch in the living room. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I could hear her moving around behind me, getting ready for her day like nothing had happened. I flipped through the pages again, reading every line, every cold, calculated detail. She wanted the house we'd bought together, the one I'd fixed up with my own hands, new paint, new floors, every leaky faucet replaced. She wanted the business, all of it, even though I'd been there from day one, back when it was just an idea scribbled on a napkin. No alimony, no equity, no nothing. Just a clean break for her, and a big, empty nothing for me. My chest tightened, and I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the anger from spilling out. I wanted to yell, to throw the papers in her face, to demand she explain how she could do this, but I didn't. I just sat there, breathing hard, letting it sink in. By the time she left for work, her heels clicking against the floor as she grabbed her bag and walked out, I was still on the couch. The door slammed shut, and the silence swallowed me whole. I looked around the room, the framed photos of us, the furniture we'd picked out together, the life we'd built, and it hit me. She'd planned this. She'd been steps ahead, plotting this casual goodbye while I was still playing the loyal husband. I dropped the papers on the coffee table and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I could have begged her to stay, could have fought right then and there, but what was the point? She'd made up her mind, and I wasn't in it anymore. But as the minutes ticked by, something else started growing inside me, not just hurt, not just anger, but a spark of something harder, something sharper. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. Not like this. I didn't know how yet, but I'd find a way to fight back. That morning, when she handed me those papers, she thought she'd ended it. She didn't know she'd just started something bigger. I wasn't always the guy sitting quietly in the background, letting life happen around me. I used to be more than that. And that morning after Camilla dropped the divorce papers on me, I couldn't stop thinking about how it all started. I sat in the living room, the same spot where I'd stared at those papers, but now my mind was drifting back to the early days, back when Camilla and I were a team. The house was still quiet, the kind of quiet that presses down on you, and I could almost hear the echoes of how things used to be. I'd been her biggest cheerleader when she started Rhodes Interiors, back when it was just the two of us in a cramped apartment, her sketching designs on cheap graph paper while I built her first portfolio website from scratch. I wasn't a tech genius, but I figured it out. Hours of trial and error, late nights with bad coffee, just so she could show her work to the world. She'd smiled at me then, her eyes bright, saying, "We're going to make it big, you and me." I believed her. I believed in us. Those first years, I was everywhere she needed me to be. I'd cold call potential clients, my voice shaky but determined, setting up meetings for her to pitch her ideas. I'd shake hands at networking events, my tie crooked and my palms sweaty, while she worked the room like she was born for it. People started noticing her talent, her charm, and soon the clients rolled in. I was proud, even if I stayed in the shadows. I didn't mind being the quiet one. I liked building something with her. When she threw her first big business mixer, I was the guy behind the bar, pouring drinks, smiling at her guests, making sure everyone had a good time. No one remembered my name, but I didn't care. Camilla was shining, and that was enough. I built half of that business with her, even if my name wasn't on the logo. The website, the client lists, the late-night brainstorming sessions, it was ours, or so I thought. Now, sitting there with the divorce papers staring back at me, I realized how much I'd given and how little she'd ever given back. The house felt emptier than ever, every corner reminding me of what I'd put into it. I'd fixed the creaky stairs, painted the walls that soft blue she loved, spent weekends planting the garden she'd always wanted. And Rhodes Interiors? I'd been the one tracking expenses when she forgot, chasing down payments from slow clients, keeping the books balanced so she could focus on designing. I never asked for credit, never demanded a title. I just did it because I loved her, because I believed in her dream. But she'd taken it all and made it hers, like I'd never existed. The anger was still there, simmering under my skin, but it wasn't just anger anymore, it was clarity. I knew that business inside and out, better than she thought I did. That was my edge, and I was going to use it. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't called in years, Zaire. He'd been a friend back in college, a guy who'd always had my back, and now he was a paralegal at some small firm downtown. I hit call, my heart picking up as it rang. "Hey, man," he answered, his voice warm but surprised. "Been a while." I didn't waste time with small talk. "I need your help," I said, keeping it simple. "Camilla's trying to take everything, divorce stuff. I've got some ideas, but I need someone who knows the legal side." He didn't hesitate. "Say no more. Meet me tomorrow, coffee shop on 5th. We'll figure it out." I thanked him, feeling a small weight lift, and then dialed another number. Noah, a freelance tech guy I'd met at one of Camilla's events. He was quiet like me, but sharp, the kind of guy who could dig into anything digital. "Noah," I said when he picked up, "I need you to track some stuff, old files, accounts, passwords. Can you do it?" He laughed, a short, dry sound. "If it's online, I can find it. Send me what you've got." That afternoon, I started pulling things together. I rummaged through the home office, her office, technically, where I'd spent countless hours working for free. Old laptops, stacks of papers, USB drives she'd forgotten about. She'd always been careless with the details, leaving me to clean up the mess, and now that was going to bite her. I found backups of early business files, client lists I'd typed up, even some login info scribbled on sticky notes she'd tossed aside. My hand shook a little as I plugged in a dusty drive and watched the screen light up with folders, years of data she thought I'd never touch. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew there was something. She'd gotten sloppy over the years, too confident, and I'd been too loyal to notice. Not anymore. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I had a plan taking shape. Zaire would help me figure out what was legal, what I could use. Noah would dig deeper, crack into accounts she'd locked me out of. And me? I'd piece it all together, every quiet contribution I'd made, every hour I'd spent building her empire. The house creaked around me, and I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Camilla thought she'd left me with nothing, but she didn't know what I was capable of, not yet. I wasn't the silent husband anymore. I was the guy who'd built half her world, and I was about to remind her of that, one file at a time. The nights started blending together after that morning with the divorce papers, each one stretching out long and restless as I sat alone in the house, digging through the past. The living room had become my war room. Papers scattered across the coffee table, my laptop glowing in the dark, a half-empty mug of cold coffee, sitting forgotten by my side. I'd always been the organized one, the guy who kept track of the details Camilla ignored, and now that was my weapon. I started small, pulling up old files from the USB drives I'd found, flipping through stacks of receipts she'd shoved into drawers years ago. At first, it was just a mess. Random numbers, scribbled notes, invoices that didn't add up. But the more I looked, the more I saw patterns she'd never bothered to hide. My eyes burned from the screen's glare, but I couldn't stop. Every click, every page, was another piece of the puzzle, and I was starting to see the whole ugly picture. Camilla had grown reckless over the years, too sure of herself, too convinced I'd never look twice at what she was doing. I found unfiled receipts, hundreds of them, tucked away in folders she hadn't touched since the early days of Rhodes Interiors. Little things at first, like payments to vendors that didn't exist, expenses listed twice on different dates. Then it got bigger, backdated invoices for projects that never happened, money shuffled to shell companies with names I didn't recognize. I leaned back on the couch, rubbing my face, trying to process it. She'd been moving cash around, hiding it, and I'd been too busy keeping her books straight to notice. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, then I typed one of the company names into a search. Nothing came up, no website, no address, just a dead end. That's when I knew I was onto something real. I kept going, night after night, the house silent except for the soft hum of the laptop and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Noah had come through with some old passwords, stuff Camilla hadn't changed in years, and that opened the floodgates. Bank statements, emails, account logs I hadn't seen since I stopped handling the day-to-day admin. I found offshore transfers, small at first, then bigger, thousands of dollars slipping out of Rhodes Interiors into accounts I couldn't trace. My heart pounded as I copied everything onto a new drive, my hands steady even though my mind was racing. This wasn't just about her cheating me out of the divorce. This was fraud, maybe worse. I thought about all those early investors, the ones who'd believed in her, the ones she'd pushed out once the business took off. I'd met them, shaken their hands, promised them she'd do right by them. Had she screwed them over too? Then I found something that stopped me cold, payments to Elliot Reyes. I knew that name. He was her consultant, the guy she'd started mentioning a couple years back, always with a little smile I didn't like. I'd seen him at a gala once, tall, slick, too friendly with her, his hand lingering on her arm while I stood across the room pouring drinks. The payments started small, a few hundred here and there, labeled consulting fees, but they grew 5,000, 10,000, all funneled through Rhodes Interiors like it was legit. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, feeling the sting of it hit me all over again. Not just her boyfriend, but her paid boyfriend, funded with money I'd helped her make. I wanted to smash something, to yell, to storm out and confront her right then, but I didn't. I took a deep breath, saved the file, and kept going. Anger wasn't enough anymore. I needed strategy. The folder I was building grew thicker every night, digital at first, then printed pages I stacked in a locked drawer. I cross-checked dates, matched payments to projects, dug into every corner of the business I could reach. I found more. Fake charitable write-offs, donations to groups that didn't exist, all logged as tax deductions. She'd siphoned hundreds of thousands over the years, pocketing it while I was balancing her spreadsheets, thinking I was helping us build a future. My hand shook as I printed the last batch, the printer whirring in the quiet house. I wasn't just fighting for my half of the divorce anymore. I was holding proof she'd broken laws, hurt people, lied to everyone. Justice wasn't a vague hope now. It was a real thing, sitting in that stack of paper. I met Zaire at the coffee shop the next day, sliding a few key pages across the table. He whistled low, flipping through them, his eyes sharp. "This is heavy," he said, glancing up at me. "You sure you want to go this far?" I nodded, my voice firm. "She doesn't get to walk away clean." He didn't argue, just told me to keep it quiet, keep it safe, and he'd help me figure out what was admissible. Noah called later, his voice tense. "I've got more account logs from 3 years back. You're not gonna like it." He emailed me the files, and I spent another night connecting dots, my coffee going cold again. Every new piece made the picture clearer. Camilla hadn't just betrayed me, she'd built her success on a house of cards. And I was about to pull it down. The courtroom felt different that day, heavier somehow, like the air itself knew something big was about to happen. I sat at my table, my hands resting on the smooth wood, my folder sitting in front of me like a loaded gun I'd finally get to fire. Across the room, Camilla perched in her chair, her posture stiff, her eyes flicking between me and the judge. Griffin Leary sat beside her, his usual smirk dialed back to something tighter, less sure. The divorce hearing had been dragging on for weeks, but this was it, the final moment, the one I'd been building toward since that morning she handed me those papers. My attorney, Delilah Chin, gave me a small nod from her seat next to me, her calm confidence steadying my nerves. I'd handed her the folder days ago, and she'd told me, "This changes everything, just wait for the right time." That time was now. The judge shuffled his papers, his glasses perched low on his nose, and looked up at us. "We're here to finalize the division of assets," he said, his voice dry and procedural. "Any last submissions before I rule?" Griffin stood, smoothing his tie, ready to launch into some polished speech about why Camilla deserved it all, the house, the business, every dime. But before he could get a word out, I raised my hand. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering, "I have something to submit." The judge nodded, curious, and I slid the folder across the table to the bailiff, who carried it up to the bench. Camilla's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing, but I kept my gaze on the judge. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let her stare me down. He opened the folder, his fingers moving slowly at first, then pausing as he read. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing, and I watched his expression shift, his brows furrowed, his mouth tightened. I knew what he was seeing, the tax evasion records, the investor fraud, the fake charitable write-offs I'd spent nights uncovering. Pages of bank statements showing offshore transfers, invoices for shell companies, payments to Elliot Reyes labeled as consulting when they were anything but. I'd laid it all out, dates, amounts, proof she'd siphoned hundreds of thousands from Rhodes Interiors into her own pockets. My hands stayed clasped in front of me, but inside, I was buzzing, every nerve alive with the weight of what I'd done. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing who she really was. Griffin shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping the table, his face tightening as the judge kept reading. Camilla leaned toward him, whispering something sharp and fast, but he shook his head, his eyes locked on that folder like it was a bomb about to go off. And it was. I'd made sure every piece was airtight. Zaire had checked the legal angles, Noah had pulled the digital trails, and I'd connected it all. The judge flipped another page, then another, his silence stretching out until it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. Finally, he set the folder down, his hands resting on it, and looked up at Camilla's side of the room. "Ms. Rhodes," he said, his voice low and serious, "these are serious allegations." My chest tightened, but I didn't move, didn't flinch. Let the evidence talk. I didn't need to say a word. Griffin shot to his feet, his voice louder than it needed to be. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the divorce proceedings. This is a stunt, a desperate attempt to—" The judge cut him off with a raised hand, his eyes sharp. "Sit down, counselor. I'll decide what's relevant." Griffin sank back into his chair, his face red, and I caught the smallest tremble in Camilla's hands as she clasped them in her lap. She wasn't smirking now. She wasn't even looking at me, just staring straight ahead, her jaw tight, her skin pale. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment settle over me like a wave. For months, I'd been the one on the ropes, the guy she thought she could toss aside with nothing. But now? Now she was the one squirming, and I was the one holding the cards. The judge cleared his throat, flipping back to the first page of the folder, and started asking questions, slow, deliberate ones, directed at Camilla's team. "Can you explain these transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands, dated 3 years ago?" he asked. Griffin stumbled over his words, something about business expenses, but the judge wasn't buying it. "And these payments to Mr. Reyes, what consulting services did he provide, exactly?" Camilla's voice broke in, sharp and shaky. "That's private. This doesn't belong here." But the judge didn't let up, his tone growing harder with every question. I sat there, silent, watching it unfold, feeling the shift in the room. Delilah leaned toward me, her voice a whisper. "You did it." They're rattled. I nodded, barely, keeping my eyes on the judge. This wasn't about gloating. It was about justice, and it was finally happening. By the time he called a recess, the air was thick with tension, and Camilla's team was scrambling. Griffin gathered his papers, his movements jerky, while Camilla shot me a look, pure venom, her eyes blazing with something I hadn't seen in her before. Fear, maybe, or fury, or both. I met her gaze, calm and steady, and didn't look away until she turned back to Griffin, her whisper sharp and urgent. The bailiff ushered us out, and I stood, my legs steady even though my pulse was still racing. Delilah clapped me on the shoulder as we walked into the hallway. "That folder's a game changer," she said. They didn't see it coming. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. The nights of digging, the years of being invisible, finally paying off. Camilla thought she'd won before the fight even started. She was wrong. That night after the courtroom showdown, I was back in the house, pacing the living room, the folder still burning a hole in my mind. The TV flickered in the background, some late-night news I wasn't really watching, but the quiet felt too heavy to sit in alone. My phone sat on the coffee table, dark and silent, until it buzzed hard against the wood, jolting me out of my thoughts. Unknown number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, then picked it up. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from hours of not talking. There was a pause, then a deep voice came through, low and raspy, like it was trying to hide itself. "Back off," it said. No hello, no explanation, just those two words, sharp and cold. My stomach twisted, but I kept my tone steady. "Who is this?" Another pause, longer this time, then a click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart thudding, wondering if I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. Someone was scared enough to call me in the middle of the night. The next morning, Delilah's name lit up my screen before I'd even poured my coffee. "Camilla's team filed a motion," she said, her voice brisk but calm. "They want to settle, full offer, house included, some cash too." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the mug warm in my hands, and let that sink in. A settlement. After everything, the folder, the evidence, the judge's questions, they were waving a white flag. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a bribe, a desperate grab to shut me up before I pushed harder. "They're scared," Delilah added. That folder hit a nerve. I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me, my mind already spinning. "What do you think?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "We've got them on the ropes. If you want more, we keep going." I set the mug down, staring out the window at the empty street. More. I wasn't done, not yet. Then things started getting weird. Delilah called again that afternoon, her tone tighter this time. "My office got broken into last night," she said. "Files tossed, nothing big taken, just a mess. Cops think it's random." But she didn't finish, and she didn't need to. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Random didn't fit. Not after that call, not after the settlement push. Later that day, I tried logging into my bank account. Froze solid, no explanation, just a "contact us" message blinking on the screen. I spent an hour on hold with the bank, my jaw tight, until they unfroze it, muttering something about a security flag. Coincidence? Maybe. But then Zaire texted me, his words short and clipped. "Guy in a black car followed me home. Be careful." My hands went cold as I read it, the pieces clicking together too fast. Camilla wasn't just rattled. She was panicking, and someone was acting on it. I sat on the couch that night, the house dark except for the glow of my laptop, trying to make sense of it all. The folder had cracked something open, something bigger than I'd expected, and now the pushback was real: phone calls, break-ins, frozen accounts. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but I was alert, every creak of the house making me glance toward the windows. Then my email pinged, a new message from an address I didn't know, no name, just numbers and letters mashed together. The subject line stopped me cold. "Check the attachments before it's too late." My pulse kicked up, and I clicked it, half expecting a virus or a scam. Instead, it was photos, grainy, but clear enough. Camilla and Griffin at a cafe, heads bent close, and a woman I didn't recognize sitting across from them. Sharp suit, dark hair, a notepad in her hand. The timestamp on the images, 2 days ago. I zoomed in, my eyes narrowing, trying to place her. Something about her felt off, too stiff, too focused. I forwarded the email to Noah with a quick note. "Who's the woman?" He got back to me in 20 minutes, his reply short, "Working on it." "Give me a day." I leaned back, staring at the screen, the photos still open. Whoever sent this wanted me to see it, wanted me to know Camilla was scrambling. But why? Was it a warning, a threat, or something else? I couldn't sleep after that, kept the lights on, kept checking the locks, my mind running circles around what I'd stirred up. The settlement offer sat in my inbox too, forwarded by Delilah, but I didn't touch it. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about the truth, and I was too close to back off now. The next day, Noah called, his voice low and quick. "That woman?" "Special Agent Thea Morgan, FBI Financial Crimes." I dug into some public records. Rhodes Interiors is on their radar. Money laundering, maybe more. My breath caught, the phone heavy in my hand. FBI. Suddenly, the break-in, the call, the tale on Zaire, it all made sense. Camilla wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting something way bigger, and I'd accidentally stepped right into it. What do? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Noah didn't sugarcoat it. Keep your head down, but don't stop. They're watching her, not you, yet. I hung up, my hands shaky, and looked at the photos again. Camilla's face in the cafe, tense and sharp, told me everything. She was cornered, and I was the one holding the match. The house felt like a cage that week, every shadow sharper, every noise louder. After that anonymous email dropped those photos in my lap, I kept them open on my laptop, staring at Camilla and Griffin huddled with Special Agent Thea Morgan, the FBI's financial crimes expert, in some tucked-away cafe. My coffee sat cold on the table, untouched, as I tried to wrap my head around it. Rhodes Interiors wasn't just a messy divorce battle anymore. It was a federal investigation, and I'd stumbled right into the middle of it. My phone buzzed every few hours. Texts from Zaire checking in, updates from Noah digging deeper, Delilah keeping me posted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched too. The late-night call, the break-in at Delilah's office, my bank account freezing, it wasn't random. Camilla was desperate, and desperation made people dangerous. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when I was this close to seeing it all unravel. I met Delilah at her office a few days later, stepping over the mess the break-in had left. Papers still scattered, a cracked picture frame leaning against the wall. She handed me a sealed file, her eyes steady but serious. This came from a source I trust, she said, tapping it with her finger. Open it when you're alone. I nodded, tucking it under my arm, my stomach tightening. Back home, I locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat at the kitchen table, the file staring back at me. My hands hesitated, then ripped it open. Inside was an affidavit, signed by Kaylee Duran, Griffin's junior associate. I'd met her once, a quiet girl with nervous hands, always trailing behind him at hearings. Now she was a whistleblower, and her words hit like a hammer. She laid it all out. Camilla faking bids to overcharge clients, manipulating contracts, funneling kickbacks to big corporate contractors. Worse, Griffin knew. He'd helped cover it up, signing off on the lies. My breath caught as I read, the pages shaking in my hands. This was the smoking gun, and it wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was criminal. I leaned back in the chair, the kitchen dark except for the glow of the lamp overhead, my mind racing. Kaylee's affidavit tied everything together, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the payments to Elliot Reyes. Camilla had built Rhodes Interiors into a front, a shiny mask for something dirty, and I'd been too busy playing the loyal husband to see it. But now I saw. The FBI was circling, Thea Morgan's presence in those photos proof they were closing in. Delilah had confirmed it over the phone that morning. The feds are watching her company, money laundering through design contracts. Your folder probably tipped them off. I didn't know if I'd started this or just sped it up, but either way, I was in it now. The threats, the call, the break-in, weren't just Camilla's panic. They were her trying to plug a leak that was already flooding. My phone buzzed again as I sat there, another unknown number. I picked it up, my voice low. Yeah. A text popped up instead of a voice. You don't want to be part of this. My jaw tightened, and I typed back, too late. No reply came, but I didn't expect one. I set the phone down, my hands steady now, the affidavit still open in front of me. Whoever was texting, whoever had tailed Zaire, they thought they could scare me off. They didn't know me, not the real me, the guy who'd spent years building something only to watch it get stolen. I wasn't the silent husband anymore. I was the guy with proof, the guy who'd accidentally kicked over a hornet's nest, and I wasn't running from it. I called Noah that night, my voice quiet but firm. You still digging? He sighed, the sound crackling through the line. Yeah. Found more encrypted emails between Camilla and some guy named Jonas Fick. Took me hours to crack, but it's shady. Offshore accounts, coded transfers. I'll send it over. My heart picked up. Jonas Fick. I didn't know the name, but it felt heavy, like another piece I hadn't seen yet. Thanks, I said. Keep it safe. He laughed, short and dry. You too, man. This is getting wild. Wild didn't cover it. When the files hit my inbox, I skimmed them. Dates, amounts, cryptic messages about cleaning the books. It was more fuel, more ammo, and I added it to the growing pile. The affidavit, the photos, Noah's finds, it was a mountain now. and Camilla was standing at the bottom, about to get buried. I didn't sleep much that night, the house creaking around me, my mind too full to rest. The FBI angle changed everything. Thea Morgan wasn't meeting Camilla to chat about interior design. She was hunting, and I'd handed her a map with that folder in court. But I wasn't just a bystander anymore. The threats kept coming, subtle but real, and I knew Camilla's team was scrambling. Griffin's name on that affidavit meant he was sinking too, disbarment at best, jail at worst. I paced the living room, the photos and files spread out like a war plan, and felt the shift inside me. This wasn't about fairness or getting my share. It was bigger, messier, a fight I hadn't signed up for but couldn't walk away from. I was standing at the edge of something huge, and all I could do was keep pushing forward, one step at a time. The days after that affidavit landed in my hands felt like walking through a storm, everything moving fast, dark clouds closing in, but I kept my footing. I sat in the living room most nights, the lamp casting long shadows across the papers and files spread out on the coffee table, my laptop humming as I cross-checked every new piece Noah sent me. Kaylee Duran's words kept echoing in my head, Camilla faking bids, Griffin signing off on kickbacks, the whole shiny facade of Rhodes' interiors crumbling under the weight of her lies. I'd known she'd screwed me over, but this was a machine, a calculated grind that chewed up clients, investors, even me, all to keep her pockets full. The FBI was in it now, Special Agent Thea Morgan's face from those cafe photos stuck in my mind, and I was starting to feel the heat too. The threats weren't stopping, and they weren't subtle anymore. It started with another text that week, late at night while I was poring over Jonas Vic's encrypted emails. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up the dark room. You don't want to be part of this. Same message as before, same unknown number. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the reply button, but I didn't type anything this time. Instead, I tossed the phone onto the couch and went back to the emails, dates, coded phrases, transfers to accounts I couldn't trace. Whoever was texting thought I'd scare easy, but they didn't get it. I was already in too deep, and every new threat just made me dig harder. The next morning, Zaire called, his voice tight. That black car was back last night, parked across my street for an hour. I'm fine, but this ain't random. My stomach twisted, but I kept my tone calm. Lay low, I told him. We're close. He grunted agreement, and I hung up, feeling the weight settle heavier on my shoulders. Delilah met me at a diner that afternoon, her eyes scanning the room before she slid into the booth across from me. She looked tired, the break-in still nagging at her, but her voice was steady. Kaylee's affidavit's gold, she said, keeping it low. The FBI's got it now, confirmed through a contact. They're building a case, and your folder gave them the push. I nodded, sipping my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. What about the settlement? I asked. She smirked, just a little. Still on the table, but it's a panic move. Camilla's team knows the feds are sniffing around. They're hoping you'll take it and disappear. I set the mug down, my hands steady. Not happening, I said. This isn't about money anymore. She didn't argue, just gave me a look that said she'd known that all along. Back home, I kept working, the house quiet except for the rustle of papers and the occasional ping of my email. Noah's latest batch had more on Jonas Vic, some shady financial fixer with a trail of shell corporations stretching overseas. The emails tied him to Camilla, vague but damning, hints of cleaning up and moving assets. I added it to the pile, my mind racing. The affidavit had already blown the lid off, Kaylee spilling about fake bids and kickbacks. But this was the next layer, the deeper dirt. Griffin was in it too, his name popping up in the emails, and I could almost picture him sweating, his smug grin long gone. The FBI had the case now, Delilah said, and I wondered how much they'd already known before I handed over that folder. Then the threats ramped up again. I woke up one morning to find my car's windshield cracked, nothing stolen, just a spider web of glass like someone had taken a bat to it. No note, no witnesses, but I knew. I called Delilah, my voice low as I stood in the driveway staring at the damage. They're not stopping, I said. She didn't sugarcoat it. They're scared, and scared people get stupid. Keep everything locked down, files, doors, all of it. I nodded to myself, the cold air biting at my hands, and went back inside. That night, another text, last chance. I didn't reply, just screenshot it and sent it to Delilah and Noah. My hands didn't shake anymore. Anger had turned into something colder, something focused. They could smash my car, tell my friends, send their cryptic messages, but I wasn't the one running out of moves. I met Zaire the next day at a park, away from prying eyes, the wind rustling the trees around us. He handed me a USB drive, his face tense. More account logs Noah pulled, stuff from 2 years back. Matches Kaylee's story. I took it, slipping it into my pocket. You okay? I asked. He shrugged, but his eyes darted to the parking lot. I'll live. Just don't like the shadows. I clapped his shoulder, grateful, and headed home to plug it in. The logs were a goldmine, transactions mirroring the affidavit, payments to contractors who'd never worked a day, all signed off by Camilla and Griffin. It was airtight, and I knew the feds would eat it up. But I wasn't done. I wanted every loose end tied, every secret dragged into the light. By the end of the week, I sat in the dark again, the pile of evidence towering on the table. The FBI was moving, Camilla's team was cracking, and I was still here, the guy they'd underestimated. The threats kept coming, but they were noise now, desperate, flailing noise. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was in the middle of something bigger, something that could take her down for good. And I was ready to see it through, no matter what they threw at me next. The final hearing crept up fast, and by the time I walked into that courtroom again, I felt like a man who'd been running a marathon, tired, but too stubborn to stop. The air was thick with tension, the kind you could feel in your bones, and I took my seat next to Delilah, my hands resting on the table, steady despite the storm inside me. Across the room, Camilla sat rigid, her face drawn tight, like she hadn't slept in days. Griffin was beside her, his tie slightly crooked, his usual swagger replaced by a twitchy edge. The folder I'd submitted weeks ago had done its damage, cracked their armor, set the FBI sniffing, but I wasn't done. I'd spent every night since then building more, digging deeper, and now I had one last play. The judge banged his gavel, the sound sharp in the quiet room, and called us to order. Closing statements, he said, his voice gruff. Let's wrap this up. Griffin stood first, his hand smoothing his jacket, trying to pull himself together. He launched into a speech, polished, rehearsed, all about how Camilla deserved the business, the house, everything, because she'd built it from the ground up. His voice was loud, confident at first, but I caught the cracks, the way his eyes flicked to me, the slight stumble over his words. He was nervous, and he should have been. The settlement offer was still on the table, bumped up since the last hearing, a fat stack of cash, and the house dangled like bait to make me go away. Delilah had forwarded it to me days ago, and I'd stared at it, tempted for half a second, freedom, a clean break, no more fighting. But I didn't come this far to cash out. I leaned forward as Griffin finished, my hands clasped, waiting my turn. The judge nodded at me. Mr. Rhodes. I stood, slow and deliberate, feeling every eye in the room on me. Your Honor, I said, my voice calm but firm, I have one final file. I reached into my briefcase, my fingers brushing the edges of the new folder, thicker than the last, packed with everything Noah and Zaire had pulled since the affidavit. The courtroom went still, a hush falling over it like someone had hit mute. I handed it to the bailiff, who carried it up to the judge, and I watched Camilla's face as he took it. Her eyes widened, her hands gripping the table, and I saw the panic flash across her, raw, unguarded. Griffin shot up, his voice sharp. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. A delay tactic. The judge didn't even look at him, just raised a hand. Sit down, he said, his tone hard enough to make Griffin drop back into his chair, his face red. The judge opened the folder, his glasses slipping down his nose as he started reading. I knew what was in there, emails tying Camilla to Jonas Vick, the financial fixer Noah had tracked, proof of shell corporations funneling money overseas, transactions that matched Kaylee's affidavit down to the dollar. I'd spent nights piecing it together, cross-checking dates, connecting dots until my eyes burned. This wasn't just about Rhodes Interiors anymore, it was international fraud, a web bigger than I'd ever imagined. The judge's face darkened with every page, his fingers pausing, then flipping back to double-check. I stood there, my heart pounding but my stance steady, letting the evidence do the talking. Camilla whispered something to Griffin, her voice low and frantic, but he just shook his head, his hands clenched on the table. They were sinking, and they knew it. The room stayed quiet, the only sound the rustle of paper as the judge worked through the file. He stopped halfway, looked up at Camilla, his eyes narrow. Ms. Rhodes, he said, these documents suggest serious misconduct, beyond the scope of this divorce. Can your counsel explain? Griffin fumbled, standing again, his words tripping over each other. Your Honor, this is unverified. It's not part of the proceedings. The judge cut him off, his voice like steel. It's part of my courtroom now. Sit. Griffin sank down, his face pale, and I caught Camilla's hands trembling in her lap. She turned to me then, her eyes wide, her voice a harsh whisper across the room. You don't know what you've done. I met her gaze, unflinching, and smiled, just a small, tight curve of my lips. I think I do, I said, loud enough for her to hear, soft enough to keep it between us. The judge kept reading, his expression growing grimmer, and I knew it was over, not just the hearing, but her whole game. Delilah leaned toward me, her voice a murmur. You've got her. This is the knockout. I nodded, barely moving, my eyes on the judge. He finished the last page, set the folder down, and rubbed his temples like it had given him a headache. This court will recess, he said finally. I'm referring these documents to the proper authorities. We're done here. The gavel banged, and the room erupted, Griffin arguing with the bailiff, Camilla staring at the table, her face drained of color. I stood there, the noise washing over me, feeling the weight lift just a little. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending it, about dragging every lie into the light. As we filed out, Delilah clapped me on the back, her grin sharp. You buried her, she said. I didn't smile back, just nodded, my mind already spinning ahead. Camilla's whisper stuck with me. You don't know what you've done, and I wondered what she meant. Was it a threat, a plea, or just the last gasp of someone who'd lost? I didn't know yet, but I'd find out. For now, I walked out of that courtroom, my head high, the folder's truth echoing behind me. She thought she could erase me. She was wrong. The week after the final hearing passed in a blur, like the world had sped up and left me standing still to catch my breath. Camilla's arrest hit the news 7 days later, handcuffs, a grim-faced mugshot. Rhodes' interiors splashed across headlines as suspected front for money laundering and fraud. I saw it on my phone, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, the steam curling up in the quiet morning light. Her assets were frozen, the business collapsed overnight, clients pulling out faster than the feds could seize files. Griffin got disbarred within days, his name tied to the affidavit and those emails, his career torched. Jonas Fick, the shadowy fixer, vanished, no trace, no word, like he'd never existed. As for me, the judge's ruling came through. I got the house, a fair chunk of what was left of her accounts, and the satisfaction of knowing the truth had won. But it didn't feel like a win, not the way I'd expected. I stood in the living room that first night after the ruling, the house too big, too empty, every corner echoing with 15 years of a life that didn't exist anymore. The furniture was still there, the couch we'd picked out, the shelves I'd built, but it felt like someone else's now. I'd spent so long fighting, digging, proving I wasn't the nobody Camilla thought I was, and now it was over. The folder, the late nights, the threats, it had all led to this, and yet I didn't know what this was. I packed a small bag that evening, just clothes, a toothbrush, some papers, and locked the door behind me. The house could wait. I needed air, space, something new. I drove north, no real plan, just the hum of the road and the weight lifting off my chest with every mile. Pine Haven was where I landed, a quiet coastal town, all salt air and gray waves, far enough from the city to feel like a different world. The first morning there, I woke up in a rented cabin, the sound of the ocean creeping through the cracked window. No phone buzzing, no files to pore over, just the steady crash of water on rocks. I walked down to the beach, my shoes sinking into the sand, the wind tugging at my jacket. For the first time in years, I didn't have to be anywhere, didn't have to fix anything. I sat on a driftwood log, watching the tide roll in, and let my mind wander. Camilla's face flashed through it, her smirk in court, her panic at the end, but it didn't sting anymore. She'd lost everything, the business, the money, her freedom. I'd walked away with more than she'd ever meant to give me, but it wasn't about that. It was about me, about finally stepping out of her shadow and into something of my own. The days in Pine Haven stretched out slow and simple. I'd grab coffee at a little shop downtown, the barista nodding like I'd always been there. I'd walk the shore, picking up shells or just staring at the horizon, letting the salt air clear my head. The settlement money hit my account midweek, enough to start over, not enough to change the world, and I didn't touch it yet. I didn't need to. The house back home was mine to sell or keep, but I wasn't ready to decide. For now, this was enough. A bed, a roof, the sound of waves. I'd spent so long chasing justice, building that case, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just breathe. Here, I remembered. One night, I sat on the cabin's porch with a beer, the sky dark and dotted with stars. My phone sat inside, off since I'd arrived, and I didn't miss it. Zaire had texted before I left. You good? And I'd said, yeah. Meaning it. Delilah called too, her voice sharp with pride. You took her down. You know that? I'd smiled, tired but real. We did, I'd said, because it wasn't just me, Zaire, Noah, her, even Kaylee, they'd all had a hand in it. But now they were back there, and I was here, alone in a way that didn't feel lonely. I tipped the bottle back, the cold fizz hitting my throat, and thought about the last 15 years. I'd been her shadow, quiet, steady, invisible, pouring myself into her dreams until mine faded. Now they were gone, reduced to evidence in a courtroom, and I was still standing. The next day, I walked into town, the streets quiet except for a few locals nodding hello. I stopped at a hardware store, bought a cheap fishing rod on impulse, figuring I'd try something new. Back at the beach, I cast the line out, the waves swallowing it, and waited. Nothing bit, but I didn't care. It wasn't about the fish. It was about the doing, the being, the space to figure out who I was without her. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold, and I reeled in the line, my hands steady. No revenge fantasies played in my head, no gloating over her arrest. That was done. This was mine, my time, my choice, my life. By the end of the week, I knew I'd stay in Pine Haven a while longer. The cabin was cheap, the air was clean, and the noise in my head was finally quiet. I wasn't celebrating, wasn't mourning, just living, one day at a time. I'd been her husband, her backbone, her ghost, but now I was just me. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The ocean rolled on, endless and steady, and I watched it, feeling like a man who'd finally walked away, not from her, but towards something better. Walk it off, stop being a baby, my wife yelled as I lay motionless on the ground. My wife's brother stood smirking while her sister accused me of ruining her birthday. But when the paramedic saw I couldn't move my legs, she immediately called for police backup. The MRI would reveal. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately know you don't belong? That's exactly how I felt standing on Marissa's pool deck, watching the rain droplets still clinging to the fancy outdoor furniture like they were scared to let go. Hell, I didn't blame them. I was scared to let go too, but not of some overpriced patio chair. I was scared of what this whole damn party represented. The concrete under my work boots was slick, and I kept shuffling toward the edge of the pool area, trying to blend into the background like I always did at these family gatherings. My steel-toed boots felt completely out of place against all the designer sandals and boat shoes scattered around the deck. Everyone else looked like they'd stepped out of some country club catalog, and here I was in my wrinkled khakis and company polo, still smelling like the warehouse from my double shift that morning. Tracy was across the yard, and damn if she didn't look right at home with her people. She had that laugh going. You know the one, where she throws her head back and shows off those perfect white teeth her daddy paid for. She was clutching some fancy cocktail that probably cost more than I made in a day, standing next to her brother Brent and sister Marissa like they were posing for a magazine spread. The golden children, all three of them, with their perfect lives and perfect problems. I should have stayed home. Should have told Tracy I was too tired, too busy, too whatever. But you don't say no to the Hendersons when they're throwing a party. Not if you're married to one of them, anyway. Not if you want to keep the peace in your own house. The party was in full swing around me. Kids splashing in the pool, adults networking over wine and cheese that had names I couldn't pronounce. I recognized most of the faces from previous family gatherings, but recognition doesn't equal belonging. These people knew exactly what I was. Tracy's blue-collar husband, who didn't quite fit their mold. The guy who fixed things and moved boxes while they moved money and made deals. I was minding my own business, really I was. Just standing there watching the water ripple in the pool, thinking about how much overtime I'd need to pull to afford the electric bill this month, when I saw him coming. Brent, that swagger of his that screamed privilege and entitlement from 50 yards away. He had that look in his eyes, the same one he'd had since the day I married his sister. That look that said he was about to have some fun, and I was going to be the entertainment. Everett, his voice cut through the party chatter like a knife through butter. There's my favorite brother-in-law. Favorite and only, but who's counting? I forced a smile and gave him a nod. Hey, Brent. Hell of a party. You know what this party needs. He was grinning now, that shark-like smile that made my stomach twist. Some excitement. Some real fun. I could feel the eyes on us already. The other guests sensing something was about to happen, turning to watch like we were the main event. This was how it always went with Brent. He needed an audience for his games, needed witnesses to his dominance. And I was always his favorite target. "Come on, Everett," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's show these people some real fun." I took a step back, my boots scraping against the wet concrete. "I'm good, man. Really, just enjoying the party." But Brent wasn't taking no for an answer. He never did. That's when I felt his hand clamp down on my arm. Not friendly, not playful, but possessive, like I was his property to do with as he pleased. "No, no, no," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to make a scene. "Brent, I'm in my work clothes, man. I don't want to." "Don't be such a buzzkill." Tracy's voice cut through my protests like she was scolding a child. She didn't even look up from her conversation, just waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "It's Marissa's day, Everett. Stop being so damn dramatic." Dramatic. That was always her word for me when I tried to set boundaries, when I tried to say no to her family's idea of fun, when I didn't want to be the butt of their jokes or the target of their games. Dramatic. Marissa chimed in from across the deck, her voice sharp with irritation. "Seriously, Everett, can you just go along with something for once? This is supposed to be my special day." The crowd was watching now, all of them, waiting to see what would happen next, waiting to see if I'd be a good sport or if I'd ruin the party with my drama. The pressure was suffocating, but it was familiar too. This was how it always went in Tracy's family. You played along with their games, or you were the problem. Brent's grip tightened on my arm. "See, even the birthday girl wants you to have some fun. Come on, little brother." Little brother. I was 34 years old, but to Brent, I'd always be the little brother who needed to be put in his place. The outsider who needed reminding of where he stood in the family hierarchy. "Brent, please." I tried one more time, but my voice was drowned out by his laughter and the encouraging calls from the crowd. Someone shouted, "Do it." Someone else was already pulling out their phone to record whatever was about to happen. That's when Brent spun me. Hard. Like I was a toy, like I weighed nothing at all. The world tilted sideways, and I felt my feet leave the ground. For a split second, I was airborne, completely at the mercy of momentum and gravity and Brent's idea of entertainment. I wasn't a child. I was a grown man with responsibilities and bills and a bad back from years of warehouse work. But in that moment, spinning through the air with the sound of laughter filling my ears, I felt as helpless as a kid being bullied on a playground. The edge of the pool was right behind me. I could see it rushing toward me as I spun, could see the concrete steps that led down into the water. Hard, unforgiving concrete that didn't care about birthday parties or family dynamics or keeping the peace. This was supposed to be just a joke, right? Just Brent being Brent. Just family fun that I'd laugh about later. That's what Tracy would say afterward, what they'd all say. Just harmless fun that went a little too far. But as I felt Brent's hands release me, as I felt myself falling backward toward those concrete steps, I knew this wasn't going to be funny at all. You ever have one of those moments where everything slows down like you're watching it happen to someone else? That's exactly what it felt like when Brent let go of me. 1 second I was spinning through the air like some kind of twisted carnival ride, and the next I was watching myself fall backward in what felt like slow motion. My arms were flailing, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing but empty air and the sound of people laughing. The laughter was the worst part, not the falling, not even the fear of what was coming, but hearing all these people finding my terror hilarious. Like my panic was the punchline to some joke I wasn't in on. I could see Tracy from the corner of my eye as I spun, still holding that damn cocktail, still wearing that expression like I was embarrassing her just by existing. Her lips were moving, probably complaining to whoever would listen about how I always had to make everything about me. Classic Tracy. Even when I was literally falling through the air, she made it about how it affected her. Time stretched like taffy as I stumbled mid-spin, my work boots trying to find purchase on the wet concrete, but finding nothing but slick surface and gravity pulling me down. My body was completely off balance, arms windmilling uselessly as I realized with crystal clarity exactly where I was headed. The concrete steps. Jesus Christ, the concrete steps. I'd noticed them earlier when I was trying to stay out of everyone's way. 3 sharp-edged steps leading down into the shallow end of the pool. Expensive-looking stone, probably some fancy Italian marble that cost more than my truck. Beautiful to look at, but hard as hell and completely unforgiving. My back hit those steps with a sound I'll never forget. Not a thud, not a splash, but a crack. A sharp, definitive crack that seemed to echo across the entire yard like a gunshot. The kind of sound that makes everyone stop talking, even if just for a second. But they didn't stop talking. They didn't even stop laughing. The pain was immediate and absolute. Not like when you bang your shin on a coffee table or stub your toe. This was different. This was my entire world suddenly narrowing down to one single point of agony that radiated out from my lower back like lightning. I tried to suck in air, but my lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. I was lying there on those damn steps, half in the pool, half out, my work shirt soaked through and clinging to my skin. The water was warm against my back, but I couldn't feel anything below my waist. Nothing. Like someone had just erased the bottom half of my body. Walk it off, Everett. Tracy's voice cut through the haze of pain and shock. She was actually shouting at me, her voice sharp with irritation and embarrassment. You're embarrassing us. Don't be such a baby. A baby. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't breathe properly, and she was calling me a baby in front of all her friends and family. I tried to turn my head to look at her, try to make her understand that something was seriously wrong, but she wasn't even looking at me. She was looking at her guests, probably trying to gauge how much damage control she'd need to do. Marissa's voice joined in from somewhere near the patio. Of course, she said, her tone dripping with frustration. Of course he pulls this drama on my birthday. My one special day, and he has to make it all about him. My one special day? Like I'd planned this. Like I'd asked Brent to grab me and throw me into her fancy pool steps just to steal her thunder. The absurdity of it would have been funny if I could feel anything below my waist. I tried to speak, tried to tell them that something was really wrong, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I can't move my legs. The words hung in the air for a moment, but nobody seemed to hear them over the sound of their own complaints and excuses. Brent was somewhere behind me, probably trying to figure out how to spin this into another joke. The other guests were starting to drift back to their conversations, the entertainment apparently over. But then everything changed. Samantha, one of Marissa's friends who I'd barely noticed before, suddenly appeared beside me. While everyone else was bitching and moaning about their ruined party, she was actually looking at me. Really looking, with the kind of focused attention that made me realize she wasn't just another country club princess. Hey, she said, her voice calm but urgent as she knelt down next to me. Hey, can you hear me? I nodded, or tried to. Everything felt disconnected, like my head was floating separately from the rest of me. I need you to try something for me, okay? Her hands were moving over my legs, checking for something I couldn't understand. Can you feel this? She pressed down on my shin, then my thigh, then my ankle. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Can you wiggle your toes for me? I tried. God, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left on just making my toes twitch. But it was like sending signals to a phone that had been disconnected. The message wasn't getting through. Samantha's face went white. Not pale, not concerned white. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast, it was like watching someone pull the plug on a bathtub. Nobody touch him, she said, her voice suddenly carrying the kind of authority that made everyone stop what they were doing. Nobody move him at all. The laughter died. Finally, blessedly, the laughter died. What's wrong with him? Tracy's voice had changed now, less irritated and more worried. Like maybe she was starting to realize this wasn't just me being dramatic. This could be spinal, Samantha said, already pulling out her phone. This could be really, really bad. Spinal. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. I knew what that meant, even through the shock and pain. I'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories. Spinal meant wheelchairs. Spinal meant never walking again. The concrete steps were still digging into my back, but I couldn't feel them anymore. Couldn't feel the warm pool water lapping at my sides. Couldn't feel my legs at all. Just dead weight. Just nothing. The shift in the air was instant. One moment, everyone was treating this like some slapstick comedy routine, and the next, Samantha's voice cut through the party chatter like a scalpel through skin. Everyone back up. Now. She wasn't asking. She was commanding, and something in her tone made even Brent shut his mouth for once. I mean it. Get away from him. Nobody touches him. Nobody moves him. Nobody does anything. I was still lying there on those concrete steps, feeling like I was watching this whole scene unfold from somewhere outside my own body. The pool water was getting warmer around me, or maybe I was just getting colder. Hard to tell when half your body has basically gone offline. Samantha was crouched next to me, her hands hovering over me, but not quite touching, like I was some kind of bomb that might go off if she made the wrong move. Her face was dead serious now, none of that polite party smile she'd been wearing earlier. "What's your name?" she asked me, her voice steady and professional. "Everett," I managed to croak out. My voice sounded weird, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "Okay, Everett. I'm Samantha. I'm a paramedic, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay very, very still. Can you do that for me?" A paramedic. Thank God. Finally, someone who knew what the hell they were doing instead of just standing around making jokes about my pain. "Can you feel this?" She touched my leg again, pressing firmly against my calf. I stared down at her hand, willing myself to feel something, anything. But it was like watching someone touch a mannequin. I could see it happening, but there was no sensation, no connection between what my eyes were seeing and what my body should have been feeling. "No," I whispered. "Nothing." She nodded grimly and pulled out her phone, but before she could dial, Brent decided to open his big mouth again. "Come on, Sam," he said with that forced laugh that meant he was starting to get nervous. It was just horseplay. Guys probably just winded, you know? Maybe pulled a muscle or something. Horseplay. Jesus Christ, he was still calling it horseplay. Samantha didn't even look at him. "Brent, I need you to shut up and step back. Right now." "Hey, there's no need to be. There's every need." Her voice was ice cold. "You just threw a grown man backward into concrete steps. He can't feel his legs. This is not horseplay. This is a medical emergency. And if you don't get out of my way so I can help him, I'm going to have you arrested for interfering with medical care." That shut him up real quick. Brent's face went from cocky to pale in about 2 seconds flat. Good. Maybe now he was starting to understand that this wasn't just another one of his stupid pranks. Tracy, on the other hand, was still in full denial mode. She came stumbling over, that cocktail still clutched in her perfectly manicured hand like it was some kind of security blanket. "Samantha, don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" She was using that voice, the one she used when she was trying to manage a situation without actually dealing with it. Everett's always been prone to, you know, making things seem worse than they are. He's probably just tired from work. Tired from work. Like exhaustion was what made your legs stop working. "Ma'am," Samantha said without looking away from me, "your husband has suffered what appears to be significant spinal trauma. He has no sensation or movement in his lower extremities. This is not fatigue. This is not dramatics. This is a potential life-altering injury that requires immediate medical intervention." Life-altering injury. The words hit me like another punch to the gut. I knew it was bad, but hearing it spelled out like that by someone who actually knew what they were talking about made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Samantha was already dialing 911, holding the phone to her ear with one hand while keeping the other positioned near me, ready to stop anyone who might try to move me. "This is Samantha Rodriguez, off-duty paramedic," she said into the phone, her voice crisp and professional. "I need an ambulance at 1247 Oakwood Drive. Adult male, approximately 34 years old, possible spinal cord injury following blunt force trauma to the lumbar region. Patient is conscious and alert, but reports complete loss of sensation and motor function in both lower extremities." The way she talked, so calm, so precise, it was both reassuring and terrifying at the same time. Reassuring because finally someone was taking this seriously, terrifying because the clinical language made it sound even worse than I'd thought. "No, do not attempt to move the patient," she continued into the phone. Mechanism of injury was a backward fall onto concrete steps following forceful spinning motion. "Yes, I'll stay on the line." Tracy was starting to pace now, her heels clicking against the wet concrete like a metronome counting down to disaster. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's going to be fine. He's always fine. This is just Everett being Everett." But even as she said it, I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. Maybe she was finally starting to realize that her husband lying motionless in a pool wasn't normal, even for me. Marissa was standing off to the side, arms crossed, looking like someone had just canceled Christmas. I can't believe this is happening at my party, she said to no one in particular. This was supposed to be perfect. Perfect. Right. Because my potential paralysis was really just an inconvenience to her birthday celebration. The other guests were starting to cluster together in small groups, whispering among themselves and shooting glances in my direction. Some looked concerned, others just looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure whether they should leave or stick around for the drama. How long for the ambulance? I asked Samantha, surprised by how weak my voice sounded. 5 minutes, maybe less, she said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. They're sending a full crew with spinal immobilization equipment. You're going to be okay, Everett. We're going to take good care of you. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, this would all become real in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. In 5 minutes, the ambulance would show up and everyone would have to admit that this wasn't just me being dramatic or attention-seeking or whatever the hell they'd convinced themselves it was. I could already hear the sirens in the distance, getting louder by the second. The sound of my life changing forever, one wail at a time. The sirens got louder until they were right on top of us, then suddenly cut out, leaving this weird silence that felt heavier than all the noise that had come before. I could hear car doors slamming, radio chatter, the sound of equipment being moved around. Professional voices cutting through the suburban quiet like they owned the place. First through the gate was Officer Riley. I could see his name tag when he knelt down next to Samantha. Big guy, probably in his 40s, with the kind of calm demeanor that comes from seeing too much shit to get rattled by anything. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, and he had that cop look in his eyes, the one that misses nothing and judges everything. What do we have here? He asked Samantha, but his eyes were already scanning the scene, taking in the wet concrete, the pool, the crowd of overdressed people standing around looking uncomfortable. Adult male, spinal trauma from a fall, Samantha said, still in full professional mode. Witnessed event. No sensation or movement below the waist. Riley nodded and pulled out a small notebook. And you are? Samantha Rodriguez, paramedic with Metro West. I'm off duty, but I was here when it happened. The ambulance crew came through the gate next. 2 women in matching Navy uniforms, moving with that practiced efficiency that emergency responders get after years of dealing with other people's worst days. The older one, a black woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, knelt down beside me while her partner started unpacking equipment from a bright yellow bag. Hi there, I'm Cassidy, she said, her voice warm but professional. I'm going to be taking care of you today. What's your name, sir? Everett, I managed. My mouth felt dry as sand, and my voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Okay, Everett, can you tell me what happened here? This was it. The moment of truth. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Tracy, Brent, Marissa, all the party guests who'd been laughing just minutes ago. They were all waiting to see what story I'd tell, probably hoping I'd downplay it, make it sound like an accident, keep the peace like I always did. But lying there on those concrete steps, unable to feel half my body, something had shifted inside me. Maybe it was the pain, maybe it was the fear, or maybe it was just finally having someone, several someones, who were actually listening to me instead of telling me to walk it off. Brent picked me up and threw me. I said, the words coming out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. I told him no. I told him I didn't want to do it. He grabbed me anyway, spun me around, and threw me backward into these steps. I can't move my legs. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear Tracy's jaw drop, could feel Brent's panic radiating across the deck like heat from a fire. This wasn't the story they wanted me to tell. This wasn't me being a good sport about their family fun. Cassidy nodded calmly and looked over at Officer Riley. You getting this? Every word, he said, scribbling in his notebook. Then he looked up at the crowd. I'm going to need to speak with everyone who witnessed what happened. Nobody leaves until I've gotten statements from all of you. That's when Tracy decided to make her move. She came clicking over in those ridiculous heels, still holding that damn cocktail like it was some kind of prop. Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said in that voice she used when she was trying to charm her way out of trouble. My husband is he's been working a lot of double shifts lately. He's exhausted. Sometimes when he's tired, he gets a little confused, you know? Confused. She was actually trying to tell a cop that I was confused about what had just happened to my own body. Cassidy didn't even look at Tracy. She was busy checking my pupils with a small flashlight, testing my reflexes, doing all those medical things that were way over my head. Can you wiggle your toes for me, Everett? I tried. Jesus, I tried so hard. I stared down at my feet, willing them to move, concentrating every ounce of energy I had left. But it was like trying to operate a remote control with dead batteries. The signal just wasn't getting through. No, I said, and the word came out smaller than I'd intended. I can't feel them at all. Cassidy exchanged a look with her partner, one of those professional glances that said more than words ever could. Then she looked over at Officer Riley. We need to treat this as a potential assault with serious bodily injury, she said quietly, but not so quietly that I couldn't hear her. This is an accidental trauma. Based on the patient's account and the mechanism of injury, this appears to be intentional. Assault. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Suddenly, this wasn't just a family incident or a party gone wrong. This was a crime scene. Brent must have heard it too, because he started backing away from the group. Now wait just a damn minute, he said, his voice getting higher and more defensive. It was just fooling around. Guys being guys. He's being dramatic like he always is. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are, Officer Riley said without looking up from his notebook. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. And I'm going to need you to stop talking until I'm ready to take your statement. This is bullshit, Brent muttered, but he stopped moving. Cassidy was attaching some kind of monitoring equipment to my chest while her partner prepared what looked like a long yellow board. Everett, we're going to get you immobilized and transported to the hospital. I'm not going to lie to you. This is serious. But you're in good hands now, okay? She was radioing in to dispatch, her voice professional and urgent. Unit 47 requesting police backup at current location. Suspected assault with bodily injury. Patient is a 34-year-old male with apparent spinal cord trauma following alleged physical assault. Everything stopped. The party guests, Tracy's complaining, even Marissa's birthday drama. It all just froze. Because those words made it official. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't horseplay. This wasn't me being dramatic. This was assault. And everyone at this fancy pool party was about to become a witness in a criminal case. Officer Riley looked up from his notebook and surveyed the crowd with those sharp cop eyes. Like I said, nobody leaves. This is now an active investigation. The blue lights from his patrol car were still flashing, casting everything in alternating shadows and harsh light, making the whole scene look surreal, like something from a TV crime show instead of a birthday party in suburbia. But it was real. Finally, terrifyingly, completely real. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, radio chatter, and Cassidy's steady voice talking me through every bump and turn. They had me strapped to that yellow backboard tighter than a Christmas present, my head immobilized between these foam blocks that made me feel like I was trapped in some kind of medical straitjacket. Every pothole we hit sent a jolt through my body that I could feel in my upper back, but nowhere else. A constant reminder that something was seriously, fundamentally wrong with me. East Haven General looked exactly like every hospital I'd ever seen in movies. All glass and concrete, and that sterile, antiseptic smell that hits you the moment the ambulance doors open. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I was being wheeled through those automatic doors on a gurney, staring up at fluorescent lights that seemed to stretch on forever. The ER was surprisingly quiet for a Saturday evening. Cool, efficient, with that hushed urgency that hospitals do so well. Nurses in colorful scrubs moved around like they had choreographed every step, and everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing except me. I was just cargo at this point, being transferred from one set of professionals to another like a package being delivered. They wheeled me into a room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The walls were that hospital beige that's supposed to be calming, but just makes everything feel sterile and cold. There was a clock on the wall that ticked loud enough to count off the seconds of my terror, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot where normal people were living their normal lives. Dr. Neil Patterson introduced himself while the nurses were hooking me up to various machines that beeped and hummed like some kind of electronic orchestra. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying hair and the kind of calm bedside manner that probably took years to perfect. Everett, I'm Dr. Patterson, he said, pulling up a chair so he could sit at eye level with me. I understand you've had quite an ordeal today. The paramedics filled me in on what happened, but I'd like to hear it from you. Can you tell me about the fall? So I told him. Again, the whole story, Brent grabbing me, spinning me, throwing me backward onto those concrete steps. The crack I heard when I hit. The way my legs just stopped working. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his tablet, nodding in all the right places. We're going to need to get some images, he said when I finished. Starting with an MRI of your spine. I know that sounds scary, but we need to see exactly what we're dealing with before we can make any decisions about treatment. Scary didn't begin to cover it. I'd never had an MRI before, but I'd heard about them. The loud noises, the confined spaces, the way they could see inside your body and tell you things you didn't want to know. But what choice did I have? I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't move anything below my waist. I needed answers, even if those answers were going to destroy my life. The MRI machine looked like something from a science fiction movie, this huge white tunnel that hummed with barely contained energy. They slid me in there like I was being fed to some kind of technological monster, and for the next 45 minutes, I listened to sounds that belonged in a construction site, not a hospital. Banging, whirring, clicking, like someone was building a house around my head. I tried not to think about what they might find. Tried not to imagine the worst-case scenarios that kept playing in my head like a broken record. Wheelchair, paralysis, never walking again, never being able to work, to support myself, to be anything other than a burden. When they finally pulled me out of that machine, Dr. Patterson was waiting with another doctor. A woman this time, older, with silver hair and the kind of serious expression that makes your stomach drop before anyone says a word. Everett, this is Dr. Celeste Warren, Dr. Patterson said. She's our spine specialist, and she's been reviewing your images. Dr. Warren pulled up a chair on the other side of my bed and opened a tablet that showed what looked like cross-sections of my back. Black and white images that meant nothing to me, but apparently told her everything she needed to know. Everett, she said, her voice gentle but direct. You have a fresh fracture in your lumbar spine, specifically at the L2 vertebra. That's what's causing your current symptoms. A fracture. I'd broken my back. The words hit me like another fall, another crack against concrete. But Dr. Warren wasn't finished. However, that's not all we found. She swiped to different images on her tablet, pointing to areas that looked damaged even to my untrained eye. We discovered 3 older fractures in your spine as well. L4, T9, and T11. These are old injuries, Everett. Some of them appear to be months old, possibly even years. The room started spinning. Not metaphorically, literally spinning, like I was back on that pool deck being thrown around by Brent. But this was worse than being thrown. This was my entire past being rewritten in black and white medical images. Old injuries. I managed to whisper. Yes, Dr. Patterson said, leaning forward. All of these fractures show signs of repeated blunt force trauma. They're in different stages of attempted healing, which suggests they occurred at different times over an extended period. Repeated blunt force trauma. The clinical language made it sound so sterile, so objective. But I knew what it meant. All those times Brent had played with me. All those falls downstairs that Tracy said were just me being clumsy. All those times I'd hit walls or furniture during his games and been told I was being dramatic when I complained about the pain. My spine had been keeping score this whole time. Every shove, every throw, every accident that wasn't really an accident. It was all there in those MRI images, documented in bone and tissue like a medical rap sheet. The trampoline, I said suddenly, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. Last summer, Brent said we should wrestle on the trampoline. I fell off, hit the frame. Tracy said I was fine. The stairs, I continued, more memories flooding back. 3 months ago, I fell down the stairs at their house. Brent said I tripped, but he was right behind me. I couldn't sit up straight for a week. Dr. Warren and Dr. Patterson exchanged a look that I was starting to recognize. The look that meant they'd seen this before, that they knew exactly what those old fractures represented. Everett, Dr. Warren said quietly, your spine is telling us a story, and it's not a story about accidents. The knock on my hospital room door came around 8 that evening, just as the nurses were switching shifts and the hallway was getting that quiet, settled feeling that hospitals get after visiting hours. I was still processing everything the doctors had told me, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my own body had been documenting years of abuse without me even realizing it. Everett. A woman's voice, professional but not unkind. I'm Detective Anika Ford with the Metro Police Department. Mind if I come in? Detective Ford was not what I'd expected. Maybe it was all those cop shows on TV, but I'd been picturing some grizzled old guy with a 5 o'clock shadow and a bad attitude. Instead, she was maybe 40, with short natural hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple black blazer and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. Officer Riley asked me to follow up on what happened at the party today, she said, pulling up the visitor's chair and settling in like she had all the time in the world. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said all day. Except the truck's name was Brent, and apparently it's been hitting me for years. She smiled at that. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that said she'd heard worse stories and wasn't shocked by mine. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Everett. I've seen a lot of things. What I'm seeing here tonight is a pattern, and patterns tell stories. She pulled out a tablet and opened what looked like a video file. Before we get into the details, I want to show you something. One of the guests at the party recorded what happened. Are you up for watching it? I nodded, even though part of me didn't want to see it. Didn't want to watch my own humiliation and pain played back in high definition. But another part of me, the part that had been called dramatic and attention-seeking for years, needed to see the proof. The video was shaky, obviously shot on someone's phone, but it captured everything. There I was, standing by the pool in my work clothes, clearly trying to stay out of the way. You could see me backing up when Brent approached, could hear me saying no, could see the exact moment when he grabbed my arm anyway. Let's show the guests some fun. Brent's voice was crystal clear on the recording, loud and boisterous like he was performing for an audience. Then came the spin. Watching it from the outside was somehow worse than living it. I could see how helpless I looked, how completely at Brent's mercy. The way he threw me wasn't playful, it was violent, deliberate, like he was trying to hurt me and didn't care who saw it. The crack when I hit those concrete steps was audible even through the phone's tiny speaker. Sharp and final, like a gunshot. And then came the worst part, the laughter. So much laughter, while I lay there unable to move. Stop being such a baby. Tracy's voice cut through the recording, dripping with contempt and embarrassment. You could see her in the background, rolling her eyes, more concerned about what the other guests thought than about her husband lying motionless in the pool. Detective Ford paused the video. What do you see when you watch this, Everett? I see assault, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I see my brother-in-law attacking me while my wife stood by and let it happen. That's exactly what I see too. She made some notes on her tablet. Officer Riley told me you mentioned this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The doctors showed me your MRI results. 3 old fractures, all consistent with the kind of trauma we just watched. So I told her everything. The trampoline incident where Brent had wrestled me off the edge and I'd hit the metal frame hard enough to crack a rib. Though we hadn't known it was cracked at the time, because Tracy convinced me I was being dramatic about the pain. The stairs at Thanksgiving where Brent had accidentally bumped into me from behind and sent me tumbling down a full flight of concrete steps. The pool party 2 summers ago where he'd held me underwater as a joke until I nearly passed out. Every time, there was an excuse. Every time, it was just Brent being Brent, just family fun that went a little too far. Every time, I was the one being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unable to take a joke. What about your wife? Detective Ford asked. What was her reaction to these incidents? That was the hardest part to talk about. Because while Brent was the one physically hurting me, Tracy was the one who made sure I never fought back, never complained, never stood up for myself. She was the one who convinced me that this was normal, that this was just how her family showed affection. She always took his side, I said. Always. If I complained about getting hurt, she'd tell me I was embarrassing her. If I tried to avoid his games, she'd say I was being antisocial. She made me feel like I was the problem for not wanting to be thrown around by her brother. Detective Ford nodded like she'd heard this story before. That's called enabling, Everett. And in some jurisdictions, it can be considered a form of abuse itself. Your wife had a duty to protect you, and instead she participated in a pattern of harm that went on for years. A pattern of harm. That phrase hit me like another revelation. Because that's exactly what it was. Not a series of accidents or pranks gone wrong, but a deliberate, sustained campaign of violence that had been normalized and excused until I didn't even recognize it as abuse. The good news, Detective Ford continued, is that we have everything we need to make this case. The video evidence is clear and unambiguous. The medical evidence shows a documented pattern of injuries. We have witness statements from the party guests, including the paramedic who treated you. She paused and looked at me directly. Based on the evidence, we're filing charges against Brent for assault with bodily harm. Given the severity of your injuries and the pattern we've uncovered, we're also looking at charges of aggravated assault and potentially domestic violence by proxy. What about Tracy? I asked. That's more complicated, but we're building a case for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice. She actively prevented you from seeking help for previous injuries and created an environment where the abuse could continue unchecked. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, validation. Someone with authority was finally telling me that what had happened to me was wrong, that I wasn't being dramatic or oversensitive, that I deserved better than being used as entertainment by my wife's family. What happens now? I asked. Detective Ford closed her tablet and stood up. Now we make sure this never happens to you again. And we make sure Brent faces consequences for what he's done, not just today, but for years. She handed me her card. If you remember anything else, any other incidents, call me. Your spine has been keeping records, Everett. Now it's time for the legal system to do the same. The news that they'd arrested Brent hit the family like a bomb going off in a quiet neighborhood. I found out around midnight when Tracy came storming into my hospital room, her face red with fury and her voice shaking with the kind of rage I'd seen her direct at store clerks and restaurant servers, but never quite at me. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the nurses wouldn't hear, but loud enough that I got the full force of her anger. They arrested my brother, Everett. They put him in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. Mrs. Henderson was outside watering her plants and saw the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson. Of course that's what she was worried about, what the neighbors would think, how this would look to her precious social circle. Not that her husband was lying in a hospital bed with a broken spine, but that the family's reputation might take a hit. Tracy, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Don't. Just don't. This is exactly the kind of dramatic bullshit I should have expected from you. You couldn't just let it go, could you? Couldn't just accept that it was an accident and move on like a normal person would. An accident. Even now, even with me lying here paralyzed from the waist down, she was still calling it an accident. Like the MRI images showing years of fractures were somehow my imagination. Like the video evidence was some kind of elaborate hoax I'd staged for attention. The doctors found 3 other fractures in my spine, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. Old ones, Tracy. From all those other times your brother played with me. This isn't about one incident. This is about years of abuse that you helped cover up. Her laugh was sharp and bitter, the kind of sound that could cut glass. Abuse? Oh, that's rich. You're calling normal family roughhousing abuse now? Jesus Christ, Everett, no wonder you can't handle a real job or make real friends. You're too busy playing the victim to actually live your life. There it was. The same pattern that had kept me trapped for years, turning my pain into my failure, making my injuries into character flaws, making me the problem for getting hurt instead of addressing the person who was doing the hurting. But something was different now. Maybe it was the painkillers. Maybe it was finally having medical professionals and law enforcement take me seriously, or maybe it was just that I'd hit rock bottom and had nowhere left to fall. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking up in a way I never had before. He threw me into concrete steps, Tracy, on purpose, and you stood there and watched it happen. You told me to walk it off when I couldn't feel my legs. What kind of wife does that? The kind of wife who's married to a man who makes everything about himself, she shot back. Do you know what this is going to do to my family? To my career? I work in public relations, Everett. How do you think it's going to look when people find out my husband is pressing charges against my brother for playing around at a family party? Her career, her family, her reputation. Not once in this entire conversation had she asked how I was feeling, whether I was in pain, what the doctors had said about my prognosis. It was all about her and how my injury was inconveniencing her life. That's when Officer Riley appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Mrs. Henderson? I need to speak with you. Tracy turned toward him with that fake smile she used on authority figures, the one that said she was a reasonable person who could surely work out any misunderstanding. Officer, I think there's been some confusion about what happened today. My husband tends to exaggerate. Ma'am, you're under investigation for spousal neglect and obstruction of justice, Riley said, cutting through her charm offensive like a knife through butter. Detective Ford has been reviewing the case, and your behavior both today and over the past several years suggests a pattern of enabling abuse and preventing your husband from seeking appropriate medical care. The color drained from Tracy's face so fast I thought she might faint. That's ridiculous. I would never. You told a man with a spinal injury to walk it off, Riley continued. You dismissed his pain as attention-seeking behavior. You actively discouraged him from reporting previous injuries. That's not spousal support, ma'am. That's criminal negligence. Tracy looked at me like this was somehow my fault, like I'd orchestrated this whole thing just to make her life difficult. Everett, tell him. Tell him I'm not. Tell him this is all a misunderstanding. But I couldn't, because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was exactly what it looked like. A woman who'd spent years enabling her brother's violence against her husband because it was easier than confronting the truth about her family. The explosion came around 2 in the morning. Not literally, though it felt like it. But emotionally, when my phone started buzzing with text messages from Tracy's extended family. Marissa was furious that her birthday party had been ruined by my drama. Their parents were threatening to sue me for defamation. Cousins and aunts and uncles I barely knew were weighing in with their opinions about what a troublemaker I was, how I'd always been jealous of Brent, how I was tearing the family apart with my lies. The messages kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. They painted me as a manipulative, attention-seeking liar who'd fabricated years of abuse just to destroy an innocent man's life. They said I was weak, pathetic, undeserving of the Henderson family name. They said Tracy deserved better than a husband who would betray her family like this. I was drowning in their anger, suffocating under the weight of their collective denial, when I heard a knock at my door. Soft, tentative, nothing like the aggressive entrance Tracy had made earlier. Everett. The voice was familiar but distant, like hearing someone calling your name from the other side of a lake. It's Talia, my sister. I hadn't seen Talia in almost 2 years. Not since Tracy had convinced me that she was jealous of our marriage and trying to cause problems between us. Looking back now, I realized that Tracy had been systematically isolating me from anyone who might have questioned what was happening to me. Talia stepped into the room cautiously, like she wasn't sure she'd be welcome. She looked older than I remembered, her brown hair streaked with gray, worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But when she saw me lying there in that hospital bed, her face crumpled with a pain that looked almost physical. "Oh, Everett," she whispered, and suddenly she was beside my bed, taking my hand in both of hers. I heard what happened. I came as soon as I could. "Talia," I said, and to my surprise, my voice came out cracked and broken. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For staying away, for not calling for." "Stop," she said firmly. "You don't apologize to me. I should have tried harder to stay in touch. I should have seen what was happening. I always knew something was off about Tracy, about that whole family, but I didn't know how bad it was." She pulled her chair closer to my bed and leaned forward, her eyes intense and focused. "I want you to know something, Everett. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped worrying about you. And I never believed for 1 second that you deserved the way they treated you. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time since I'd married Tracy, someone from my family was telling me that I mattered, that I was worth protecting, that I deserved better than what I'd been getting. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I cried. The surgery came 3 days later. Dr. Warren explained it like she was talking about fixing a car engine, rods and screws and fusion procedures that would stabilize my spine and hopefully give me the best shot at walking again. Best shot being the operative phrase, because nobody could promise me anything except pain and a long road to recovery. I woke up from the anesthesia feeling like I'd been hit by that same truck all over again, except this time it had backed up and run me over a few more times for good measure. The incision in my back felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to my spine, and the drugs they gave me for the pain made everything fuzzy and distant, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain, it was the fear. Every day, I'd stare down at my legs under those hospital blankets and will them to move, to twitch, to give me some sign that the surgery had worked. Some days I swore I could feel something, a tingling or a twinge, but the doctors warned me that phantom sensations were common and didn't necessarily mean anything. That's when Dr. Amelia Rojas entered my life like a drill sergeant in scrubs. She was maybe 5'0" but carried herself like she could bench press a pickup truck, with graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and the kind of direct stare that made you sit up straighter even when you were lying flat on your back. "Everett," she said on our first day, "I'm your physical therapist, and I'm going to tell you something right now that might piss you off. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. There are going to be days when you want to quit, when you want to give up and accept that this is as good as it gets. But I'm not going to let you." She was right about it being hard. Jesus Christ, was she right? The first week, all we did was try to get me sitting up without passing out. My balance was shot, my core strength was non-existent, and every movement felt like my spine was being twisted with a wrench. I threw up twice the first day, just from the effort of staying upright. "Your body remembers pain, Dr. Rojas would say during the sessions that left me sweating and shaking. Now we need to teach it to remember strength. Meanwhile, Dr. Priya Jain was working on my head while Dr. Rojas worked on my body. She was younger than I'd expected for a trauma counselor, maybe 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that made you feel like you could tell her anything. "You weren't weak," she told me during one of our sessions. "You were systematically manipulated to believe you deserved the treatment you received. That's not weakness, Everett. That's psychological abuse. And it's just as real as the physical injuries." She helped me put words to things I'd never been able to articulate. The way Tracy would gaslight me into thinking my pain wasn't real. The way Brent's games always seemed to escalate when I tried to set boundaries. The way the whole family would close ranks and make me feel crazy for objecting to behavior that any normal person would recognize as abusive. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after surgery. I was in the physical therapy room, strapped into this contraption that was supposed to help me learn to balance again, when Dr. Rojas told me to try to stand. I'd been trying to stand for weeks with no success, my legs hanging like dead weight no matter how hard I concentrated. But something was different that day. When I focused all my energy on pushing down through my feet, I felt something. Not normal sensation, not anything close to what I used to feel, but something. A connection between my brain and my legs that hadn't been there before. "Holy shit," I whispered as I managed to support some of my own weight for about 3 seconds before collapsing back into the safety harness. Dr. Rojas was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Did you feel that?" "I felt something," I said, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt something else too. Hope. The courthouse was nothing like I'd expected. Maybe I'd watched too many legal dramas, but I'd pictured something grand and intimidating. Instead, it was just a regular building with fluorescent lights and worn carpet that smelled like old coffee and anxiety. But walking into that courtroom, with my cane and my unsteady gait, felt like walking into the most important moment of my life. Brent's lawyer was exactly what you'd expect from someone defending a rich kid's assault case. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, and the kind of condescending smile that said he thought this whole thing was beneath him. During opening statements, he painted Brent as a fun-loving family man whose harmless prank had been blown out of proportion by an oversensitive brother-in-law with a history of dramatic behavior. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, gesturing toward Brent like he was showcasing a prize pupil. "This was nothing more than typical family horseplay that unfortunately resulted in an accident. My client never intended to cause harm, and the prosecution's attempt to criminalize normal sibling behavior is frankly ridiculous." Normal sibling behavior. Even in a courtroom, they were still trying to make this my fault for not being able to take a joke. But then the evidence started rolling in, and their story fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Sandra Martinez, methodically laid out the case piece by piece. First came the video footage from the party, played on a big screen where everyone could see exactly how violent Brent's prank had been. The courtroom was dead silent as they watched me being spun and thrown like a rag doll. You could hear Brent's laughter on the recording, could see the deliberate force he used, could watch the exact moment my body slammed into those concrete steps. There was nothing playful about it. Then came Dr. Warren with the MRI images. She put up those black and white pictures of my spine on a screen and walked the jury through each fracture like she was reading a medical textbook. 3 previous fractures, all consistent with blunt force trauma. L4, T9, T11. These injuries occurred over a period of several years and show a clear pattern of repeated abuse. When it was my turn to testify, I was terrified my voice would shake or I'd stumble over my words. But as I sat in that witness chair, looking out at the jury, something clicked. These people deserve to hear the truth, not the sanitized family version, not the victim-blaming bullshit I'd been fed for years, but the actual truth about what had happened to me. I told them about the trampoline incident, the stairs, the pool games that weren't really games. I explained how every injury had been dismissed. Every complaint had been turned back on me as evidence of my weakness or dramatic nature. Brent didn't just hurt me that day at the pool, I said, my voice steady and clear. He'd been hurting me for years, and my wife's family had been teaching me that it was my fault for not being tough enough to take it. Dr. Jane's testimony was devastating. She explained trauma bonding, gaslighting, and the psychological manipulation that keeps abuse victims trapped in cycles of violence. She made it clear that my reluctance to fight back or report previous incidents wasn't weakness. It was a predictable response to sustained psychological abuse. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Brent's face went white. His lawyer immediately started talking about appeals, but the judge wasn't having it. Mr. Henderson, Judge Patricia Monroe said, looking directly at Brent, you have shown a pattern of violence toward your brother-in-law spanning several years. Your actions were deliberate, calculated, and resulted in serious bodily harm. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison. Tracy got 18 months probation and court-ordered counseling for enabling abuse. As they led Brent away in handcuffs, Judge Monroe's closing words echoed through the courtroom. You mocked his pain, dismissed his suffering, and treated him as less than human. But he survived your cruelty, and now justice has been served. 18 months later, I'm standing in my own kitchen making coffee in my own apartment, and I still can't quite believe this is my life now. The place isn't much, a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with hardwood floors that creak when I walk in windows that actually let in sunlight. But it's mine. Nobody here tells me I'm being dramatic when I need to rest my back. Nobody dismisses my pain or makes jokes about my limp. The limp is permanent, according to Dr. Warren. Some days it's barely noticeable. Other days I need the cane to get around without looking like I'm drunk. But I'm walking. Against all odds, against the initial prognosis that had me preparing for life in a wheelchair, I'm walking on my own 2 feet. The job at the Metro Men's Outreach Center started as volunteer work, something Dr. Jane suggested to help me process my own trauma by helping others work through theirs. Turns out, there are a lot of guys out there who've been told their pain doesn't matter, who've been convinced that speaking up about abuse makes them weak or dramatic. You taught me to trust the quiet ones, Samantha told me last week when she stopped by the center. She's working as a trauma nurse now at East Haven General, and she makes a point of really listening to patients who aren't making a lot of noise about their pain. The ones who say they're fine when they're clearly not fine. You taught me that quiet doesn't mean okay. I still get emails from Tracy. She's in therapy now, court-ordered at first, but she says she's continuing it voluntarily. Her messages have evolved from angry blame to something that might eventually resemble an apology, though we're not there yet. Her latest email accused me of wrecking everything by pressing charges, but there was less venom in it than before. Maybe that's progress. I don't respond to her messages anymore. Dr. Jane calls it protective boundaries, and I call it sanity. I didn't wreck anything. I just finally told the truth about what was already broken. The MRI scans are framed on my wall now. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Those black and white images of my fractured spine aren't just medical records. They're proof. Proof that I wasn't making it up, wasn't being dramatic, wasn't weak for not fighting back. Every crack in those vertebrae is documentation of survival. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the years I lost, the pain I endured, the family that threw me away rather than acknowledge what they'd done to me. The honest answer is that some days I am angry, but mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that Samantha knew what she was looking at when I couldn't move my legs. Grateful that Dr. Warren could read the story my spine was telling. Grateful that Detective Ford believed me when I finally found the courage to speak up. I was told to walk it off, to stop being a baby, to quit making everything about me. Now I walk on my own terms, at my own pace, toward a future I'm building for myself. Every step I take is proof that they were wrong about me. My spine may have been broken, but my voice is whole now. And that makes all the difference.